Good evening and welcome to the November 16th meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. To start, I'll summarize the hearing process and review the agenda, and we'll get right into it. All hearings are advertised and held in accordance with the open meeting law. All application files are open to the public for review prior to the hearing. I ask that everyone in attendance here tonight please show courtesy and respect by silencing their cell phones and other electronic devices. Please listen to the applicants, the witnesses, and the board. Please refrain from private conversation in the hearing room or outside of the hearing room. I also ask that you refrain from making derogatory statements, and when the time comes, to please exit the hearing room quietly. All hearings are recorded, and tonight we're also being televised to ensure a true and accurate record. We start the application by having the clerk read the application into the record, as well as the clerk reading the referrals and any other pertinent information that we have in the file. After that, the applicant or their agent will briefly summarize the application and state why relief should be granted in accordance with specific sections of the Falmouth bylaws. After that, board members will ask questions of the applicant. The public will then be asked to comment. Public usually has 2 minutes apiece per person, and we usually cap that at 15 minutes. We do ask when the public comes up to the lectern, please state your name and address for the record. And please ask any questions through the board, and we will get the question answered by the applicant. At the close of the hearing, the board will thoroughly discuss the application. Based on testimony and the board's discussion, the applicant may wish to modify the request or withdraw the request. Following board discussion, there are several options for us to consider. We either decide for a continuance if we need additional information. We'll decide to continue to a date certain in the future. We could also decide to vote to close the hearing. We could take action on the application, take the matter under advisement, or request a draft motion from the zoning administrator. I'd like to introduce the board at this time. To my right is Ed Van Kuren. He is a full voting member of the board. To my left is Bob Dugan. He is an associate member of the board. He is followed by Jerry Patamas, who is also an associate member of the board, and Paula Murphy, who is a full voting member. Tonight we also have Sri Boudreau, who is the zoning administrator, and Ashley DeMello, who is our recording secretary for the night. My name is Terrence Hurry. I am the vice chair of the board, and I'm the acting chair for tonight. And we do have a few people on the board who are not with us tonight. I'll be appointing Bob as the acting clerk. For tonight, we do have one hearing starting now at 5:30. We have 2 continuations, and we also have items on the open meeting. So with that, we can get to our first application, which is 85-17 Millbury, 87 Penzance Point in Woods Hole. And there's 5 voting members on this application.
Application number 085-17, being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 40A of the Mass General Laws, you're hereby notified that Cassandra Mellon Millbury and E. Van R. Millbury of Ligonier, Pennsylvania, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-23G, 1B, and 240-70D of the Code of Falmouth to allow a detached 4-car garage with more than 900 square feet of space and a building height of 24 feet 8.5 inches on subject property known as 87 Penzance Point, Woods Hole, Mass. For referrals, we have a letter from Conservation Commission that the proposed location is outside of their jurisdiction, though most of the parcel is within the resource area buffer. If the work stays outside the wetland buffer to coastal banks, then no filing is needed. No referral or comment from Fire Department. From assessors, it includes lots 10, 15, and 16B. No comment from planning, and there are no letters in support or against in the file.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Greg Jones, architect for Mr. Milbury. Also in the audience, if questions arise, are Mike Borselli, the engineer on the project, and Peter Coffin, the builder. If you've been out to Penzance Point, you're familiar with the property. It's about a 9-acre parcel with a significant historic home, commonly known as the Longhouse on it. The house itself is a turn-of-the-century shingle-style home, fairly large, characterized by large gambrel dormers. What's somewhat interesting about the house is that it has no garage. The homeowners have a significant collection of cars that they keep there during the summer. So they've asked to build a 4-car garage to house their cars. So I've tried to design a garage that's in keeping with the style of the house. Because of the zoning bylaws, we're limited to the number of cars we're allowed to have in a garage without a special permit. That's why we're asking for a 4-car garage. We're also limited to the height of a building, an accessory building, to 18 feet. But the zoning bylaws allow, via special permit and this board's discretion, the ability to have an accessory building go up to 25 feet, provided we present it to you and it meets with your approval. There's a couple other caveats, including not turning any space into living units, which we will not. The second floor of this garage is strictly storage. There will be a toilet and a sink on the first floor, a stair to get upstairs, a washer and dryer, primarily to provide for cleaning of car wash stuff, rags and towels and things. They do have somebody that takes care of their cars, so the cars will be washed and then dried, so they need a spot nearby without having to go to the main house. Mr. Borselli has prepared a site plan which we've also submitted as noted by Conservation Commission. It's outside of their jurisdiction. It's well over 200 feet from the top of Coastal Bank. It's 75 feet from Penzance Road, so it's set well back behind a stand of bushes and trees. Site plan is here. We've submitted it for you as well. Elevation-wise, there's a series of primary gambrel forms that try to mimic the main house. All materials will match the existing house: white cedar shingles for the sidewalls, red cedar shingles for the roof. The total height of the structure is 28 foot 8.5 inches to the top of the ridge, so we're just below the 25-foot limit. And again, given the size of the garage and the gambrel form, it sort of gets us to that height. And personally, I think it works well with the existing structure. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, but this is what we're hoping you'll approve. Thank you.
Let's start with questions from Ed.
I have no question.
Bob?
Could you just repeat the height again?
It's 24 foot 8.5 inches. I think when I applied it, schematics, it said 24.8 feet. I've done full-size sections, so I'm a little more precise now. So it's a little lower than what we submitted for.
That's all I have.
Jerry?
I noticed the Board of Health didn't comment. I'm assuming you're tying in the lavatory and,
Right. Well, Mr. Borselli designed a new septic system just for the toilet and the washer dryer that's going to be in this facility.
okay, so that's Board of Health to
Yep.
take care of that.
Paul?
No questions.
Sari, any questions?
No, I don't, thank you.
You did state during your testimony that the, I guess we could call it the second floor, it'll remain unfinished for storage only? And with the understanding that there's no habitable space up there?
Correct.
Will it be unfinished, or?
It's going to be insulated, but there'll be plywood on the floor, more industrial, just sort of industrial storage lighting.
And will the garage be built on a concrete slab?
That's correct.
No basement?
No basement.
And just to clarify, you said that a separate septic system is being installed for?
That's correct. The
for
main
these?
house has a significant septic system that would accommodate this, but it's on the other side of the house, which is
Right. It's a fair
6 acres
distance
away.
away. Okay. Does it for me. I guess we can turn it to the public. Would anyone like to speak in favor of this application? Okay, seeing none. Was anyone out there opposed to the application? Okay. Since no one in the public has any comment, and I think the board is satisfied with the application, what would the board like to do?
Close the hearing?
Is that a motion, Jerry? to
Yes.
Close?
Motion to close by Jerry, and that is second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And I think we're leaning toward approving the project. Would anyone like to make that motion?
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion to approve by Ed, and that's second by Jerry. All right, findings.
New septic is gonna be installed.
And that'll tie in with 240-216.
Not substantially more detrimental. It has adequate,
It's not under 240-3,
I'm sorry.
so you need to look at 240-70D. So, and the findings should be 240-70D says no accessory apartment and no subdividing the lot below 2 acres.
Right.
So, if they do want an accessory apartment, because that bylaw has changed at the last town meeting, then, or the April town meeting, I believe it was, when was it? Anyway, they have to come back to the board, so you can make that finding. And you might want to make a finding that it is heated because of the cars.
And this laboratory,
Storage.
water,
Bathroom's not habitable
But it
space,
can
so it
freeze.
doesn't matter. Yeah,
that's what I see.
oh, I see what you're saying, sure.
I think it's
So-
worth noting it's also for his car collection due to the size being four-car
Yeah, you
garage.
can make that finding if you'd like.
Sure. It's a large garage.
Yeah. So's the lot, so's the house.
So 10 acres.
Yeah.
The existing proposed structure is 1.78%, which is less than the allowable of.
Slightly.
Can I say significantly? Is it de minimis?
Significantly.
We don't want to say that.
Okay, do you want to make conditions?
Does it like the drawings?
Per plan? Yeah.
No habitable space on the second floor?
Yep.
You also want to include
Condition.
240-70D that they can't subdivide below 2 acres
Sure.
But they have the right to come back for the accessory.
for the accessory, but that's a finding that, and that's really totally different. That's up to the applicant.
All right. If we're all set, that motion was made by Ed and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Get that one?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Make that motion.
Okay, you wanna make a motion to go to the open meeting, item number 2, and then return to the regular meeting?
So your motion is to take it out of order?
Okay, motion's been made to take the open meeting agenda item number 2 out of order and then reconvene back in a public hearing. It was made by Jerry. I'm sorry, that was made by Ed. Anyone like to second that? Jerry? All right, second by Jerry. All those in favor? Aye.
Okay, board members. The request has been made by Attorney Warren Brody on behalf of Habitat for Humanity. You approved a special permit out on Gifford Street for a restore. This restore was based on the one in Yarmouth, and this board conditioned that it be open from Tuesday to Saturday. Since then, Yarmouth has changed their hours, and they have included Monday, 9 to 5. So Attorney Brody is asking you for an administrative approval to include Monday through Saturday to change that condition, and he's present if you'd like to ask him any questions.
Good evening, members of the board, Ms. Boudreau. I think you stated it accurately. I don't need to reiterate it. The days of operation, I do not believe was ever a matter of contention in the hearings on the special permit. It was just that at the time Habitat was operating its other restore on a Tuesday through Saturday basis. That has since changed, and we'd like to have uniformity in the operation of our restores. So we'd like to amend the special permit to change it from Tuesday to Saturday to Monday to Saturday.
9 to 5, the hours will remain the same?
The hours will remain the
Thank you.
same and nothing else has changed.
Thank you. So there's no derogation from any other conditions. If the board would like to administratively approve that?
I just have one quick question.
Certainly.
And I didn't check the file ahead of time, my apologies, but I think I remembered that the restore wasn't open on Mondays so that you could take stock of inventory and then rehab some items to make them available for sale.
I don't doubt that. I don't know how it's being done in Yarmouth now, but the 6-day-a-week model is more what we want.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to approve the administrative approval, the change?
Modification administratively approved.
That's what I said.
Motion was made by Jerry and second by Ken. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Paul.
Oh, yeah.
It's tough when
I got it right.
It's tough when we're a few men short tonight, and women.
You're all set. I'll draft that up and send it to you. Okay? Good luck at your hearing tonight. Okay, you need a vote to go back into public hearings?
Motion to go back?
Yeah, motion and a vote.
Motion to return to the public hearing?
All right, motion to reconvene the public hearing. That was made by Jerry, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Up next, we have two continuations that were opened together. Application 67-17 Midway Trap and 68-17 Bagley et al. Before we begin,
Mr. Chairman?
yes,
I'm going to recuse myself from both of those hearings.
Paul Murphy is
Thank you,
recusing
Paul.
himself. Thank you, Paul. Before we start with these hearings, I believe the building commissioner, Rod Palmer, is in attendance, and he'll be making statements to start. Also like to mention at this time, when it comes to opening up for public questions, we'll be taking them in this order. We will start with the opposition to the appeal for Midway, followed by the support of the appeal for Midway. After that, we'll go to opposition to the appeal for Bagley, and then support of appeal for Bagley. And that's just to make things as orderly as possible tonight, given the size of our audience and for the record as well. So if we'd like to start, Mr. Palmer? Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Rod Palmer, Falmouth Building Commissioner. Thank you for having me here this evening to explain my rationale, I think. So I was asked to be here this evening so that I may explain my reasoning for issuing the cease and desist order on July 10th, 2017. I'll be as brief as I possibly can.
You can hold that mic. You can take it out of the stand and hold it if you'd like, if it's more comfortable. It doesn't go up any.
Well, it doesn't go up?
No.
That's all right.
Okay.
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So what I would like to do, Mr. Chairman, is, if I may, hand out some photos.
Good to hear them.
sir. Yep.
Thank you.
So on July 10th, I issued a cease and desist order to Midway Trap and Skeet, and the purpose of that cease and desist order was to cease the use of the pistol range. So at the Midway Trap and Skeet, we have three separate areas, three separate components. One is a trap and skeet area, one is a rifle range, and one is a pistol range. Previous to July 10th, going back to mid-May, for the past 6 months, I have received hundreds of pages of documentations, from affidavits to aerial photos to affidavits. I have reviewed and read every bit of documentation that I have. I have affidavits, sworn statements from both sides, some conflicting. So I decided that I would take a more practical approach, and that's why you have those photographs. So I think it was on May 17th, if you look at the photographs, I think I have a date on there, 5/17. On 5/17, I visited the Midway Trap and Ski Club. I walked the entire area. I started with the trap and skeet area, and I walked the perimeter. And I'd like to, if I could, just explain to you what I observed in my walk around the site. At the trap and skeet area, it's clear that the perimeter of that area is well established. There are large trees with large calibers of the tree. There's enough vegetation there. It's such an established area, one could assume that it's been there for 50, 60 years. I don't know. It's impossible for me to put a date on it, but clearly it's been there for a very long time. If you look at the photos that I've given you, photo number 1 is a point of view from the trap and skeet area. Photo number 2, same area. If you look at photo number 3, that's a photograph of the rifle range. And again, on the rifle range, there's a berm. And when you look at the berm, you can look at the trees, you can look at the vegetation, and you can see that clearly it's been there for a great length of time. Was it 1970? Was it 1971? Was it 1969? I don't know. I don't know. But clearly it's been there for a long time. If you flip to the next page, and you go to page number 4, that photograph was taken from the rifle range from the far end. And if you look at that, if you look at the earth berm to the right, you can see where a portion of it is well established with vegetation and growth and trees. Then you can see an area where there's no vegetation, it's just gravel. There's nothing. There's no vegetation whatsoever. And if you go to the next page, page number 5, that's a photograph of the pistol range at the end where you might stand with your pistol. And you can see the earth berm there. There's an earth berm with no vegetation on it at all. If you look at the top of that earth berm, you can see trees that have been there for a great length of time. You can see organic material that has somewhat been undermined or washed out from rain. If you look at the next photo, you'll see photo number 6. Photo number 6 is looking down the range. And that's just to give you an idea of that, another point of view from where I stood, of the earth berm to the right and to the left. And keep in mind, on the next page, number 7, that's also a photo of the pistol range taken from the right side. And that's a view of the earth berm of the pistol range to the right. And on that berm, you can see there's no vegetation whatsoever. So when were those berms created? I don't know, but I don't think it was 1970. I think it would be highly unlikely that these earth berms would be in existence from that time without some sort of vegetation. So I can't clearly say when those earth berms were created or when the pistol range was created, but I don't believe that it was in 1970 or before 1970. If I had to put a time on it, I would say within the last 5 to 10 years. I've looked at other pieces of documentation from Mr. Arment's office, aerial photos. I've read countless affidavits from neighbors in the nearby subdivision. I've read a number of affidavits from members of the Midway Trap and Skeet, and many of them contradict each other. So which is accurate, which is not, I don't know. So for that reason, for that practical reason, of the earth berms, the vegetation, and the dynamics of the site, that's why I came to that conclusion that the pistol range was not there previous to 1970. I'm not sure if the board has any questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them.
In terms of questions, Ed, do you have any questions?
No, not right now.
Bob?
No, not right now.
I have one question, maybe it'll
Sure.
be answered by one of the attorneys. It's obvious that, there's recent disturbance there,
Yeah.
5-10 years.
Mhm.
There's nothing to say if there could have been firing range there before this recent disturbance, if there was improvements to the range and things like that. Did you receive anything other than some testimony that say people were firing pistols there? Because they could have had a pistol range there and then upgraded it within the last 10 years.
Well, I don't know what they had there. In my site visit, I believe it makes logical sense to assume that that portion of that pistol range was not there. Did they fire pistols from the rifle range? I don't know. Maybe they did. I don't know. Did they have a pistol range there and enhance the pistol range by creating these earth berms and creating a new section for the pistol range? Possibly, but that would have required a special permit. So if they had a rifle range and that rifle range was used for pistols, and they elected to enhance or augment their site by creating a pistol range specifically for pistols, that would have required a special permit.
But if they were using a sliver of land, and I think there's one of the photographs that say that, at least, unless I'm mistaken, and this might be a point for one of the attorneys, that they could have been firing pistols on a very narrow range, which is not the rifle range. Doesn't take much in my experience, it wouldn't take much to establish 25-yard, 50-yard pistol range with 1 or 2 firing ports.
They could have, but we have a lot of photos here, but keep in mind, when those photos were taken, the photos weren't taken for the purpose of determining whether or not there's a pistol range there. Those photographs were taken for other purposes. They're satellite photos, they're photos of their flyovers, there's some engineering that was done on site for a communications tower. So the photos that we have are somewhat grainy, and I think if the purpose of those photos were for determining whether or not there's a pistol range, I think it would have been, maybe the photographs would have been taken from a different angle, but these photographs were not taken for the purposes of trying to determine whether or not there's a pistol range there. So when we look at these photos, they're taken at a time where there's vegetation, so it's challenging to look at these photos and see if there was a pistol range there. Possibly there was, and maybe they augmented the site by creating this earth berm or carving out this earth berm. But even that augmentation of the site, expansion of the site, would have required a special permit.
Yeah, I guess I'm just going to ask Sari, and maybe the attorneys can, if they were using a pistol range in that relative vicinity, are you saying to improve it they would need to come in for a special permit to put in the backstop or things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to speculate on what might have been there. I really don't know. I mean,
But if they were firing on a range in that vicinity, which we don't know, they could have done improvements to that without a special permit.
well, I think that improvement in this case would have been, in my opinion, creating those earth berms and carving out that earth to create what they have now. And I would say yes, that would have needed a special
Okay,
permit.
all right, thank you.
Yes.
All set, Jerry?
Yes.
Suri, do you have any questions?
No, I was going to ask Commissioner Palmer if he wanted to speak on the other appeal, the Bagley appeal that Attorney Ament submitted while you're up there, or do you want to go back up later?
Yeah, I'd prefer to go back up if we could and, focus on this one, and then I'll comment on that if need be. Unless-
Yeah, the board's going to need to hear from you on that.
Okay, that's
so-
fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Attorney George.
Sorry, sir.
Attorney George.
Okay, we'll go with the appeal for, the attorney representing the appeal for Midway.
First, I have some photos that, actually, I took them. I didn't reproduce them. And I apologize, they're with my cell phone. But it is an Android, whatever. No offense to Apple users, like all my kids. And they're just photos of the club so that you get an idea. I appreciate that Mr. Palmer went out there, and I think I said last time, we're happy to have any member of the board go out there. It's good if you do that when there's somebody else there, because I don't know how much everybody knows about shooting. Certainly don't want someone walking down one of the ranges if there's somebody shooting. This is, there's my glasses, Susan. This is, and this is my associate, Susan Chu, by the way. She's an attorney and also, involved in the case and has written some of the law explanations that we've submitted to the board and to Mr. Palmer. This is a view of the so-called rifle range. You can see that it's called the long rifle range. I'll get into that discussion, but I guess I'm doing both, Suri, right? So there's debate about how long the rifle range is. If I say anything to you about the rifle range that I would like you to remember, it's that building on the left has been to the left of that range, and that range has been there shooting in that direction, down that furrow or gully towards that white backstop since before 1971. It hasn't changed its direction of fire. It hasn't changed its location. And fundamentally, what gets shot on it has historically been hunting rifles that people have targeted in. This is not a rifle club. It's not a pistol club. It's originally thought of as a trap club with incidental use for rifles and pistols. The trap, and I say that because the trap shooting, which is the clay target shooting up on a plateau, is the primary, it's the only thing that is organized in the sense that they have a regular shoot there. Probably, I think one of our affidavits says 3 out of 4 Sundays a month. The club rents out its premises sometimes to groups. It has a, I always forget this, picnic grounds, and they're not shooting when they're doing that. The rifle and pistol shooting is incidental. It's incidental by the members of the club. They have taken their kids there to learn to shoot rifles and pistols. They have sighted in their rifles and pistols there. This is not an organized club in the sense that it organizes rifle and pistol matches like many clubs do, which have many more members. This club has 125 cap on its membership and has had for decades. The number of people who are members has grown very slightly because after so many years as a member, you get to be a life member. Right now, I think we have affidavits that say there's 123 members, regular dues-paying members, and something like 30 or 40 life members. Maybe 20 years ago, there were 20 life members, okay? That's an incremental, and I argue to you, incidental increase in membership. It's not the Reading Rifle and Revolver Club. It's not the Monument Beach Club. It doesn't hold organized shoots for outsiders with rifles and pistols. The members, people who are guests and members can come and shoot trap, but only the members shoot pistols and rifles. Once in a while, one may bring a guest. Next picture, Susan. So, by the way, back to that, Sue, thanks. To the left, you see the berm, okay? Now, I understand that you can come over here and do it. Come on around, Sue. The berm on the left-hand side of the rifle range, no, you're not.
Which one are you trying
Okay, sorry.
to press the red button?
You learn something new every day.
That's the laser, the red button.
Okay,
Oh, wait.
all right. She left me.
No, you're pressing the red button.
Oh,
It's
okay.
the red button.
Oh, that changes the picture too?
If you press the button under it, yeah.
Okay. That's the berm that was constructed. And by the way, there are conflicting affidavits. It's the only bone I have to pick with Rod Palmer. There aren't conflicting affidavits. There are affidavits from several people filed by Attorney Emmett who say, we bought our house in 2012 and the amount of shooting has increased tremendously since 2012. There's an affidavit that says, incredible, we bought our house in 2014, and the amount of shooting at the pistol range has increased tremendously since 2014. Well, I have submitted 5 affidavits initially from people who are long-term members of the club. Some of them, like John R. Augusta III, a member since he shot there with his, or a member's son since he shot there with his father in the late 60s. I have 5 affidavits from people who either have shot there, rifles and pistols, especially we're talking pistols, since the late 70s, or have fathers who are dead, who have shot there in the pistol range since the late 60s. And that's the area right here. And if you look at the aerial photos that we have submitted, and we haven't submitted just 2 aerial photos, the pistol range has always been to the left of the rifle range, has always been shorter. What happened is in 2010, that berm went in and that backstop, maybe you can show me the pistol range, Susan. No. There's a picture. Again, we just had it. Why don't you upright this thing? You had it. You went by it. No, that's not it. Back one. All right. I'm not going to use this. Does this shut the thing off, Sue?
I think you're pressing the button under it. Here, I'll do it.
All right. I'm sorry. I have a tremor. You can see there's the pistol range. There's that berm, okay? What happened, and we have submitted granted, it was after Mr. Palmer's decision, a letter with a copy of a report that was given to the club in 2000 by Dan Gilmore, Mass DEP, down in the southern office. Dan Gilmore went there in 2000, part of a Lead Shot Initiative program that was initiated in 1999, 2000 by the Mass DEP to go to all of the established ranges in Massachusetts and make recommendations to those clubs for how the ranges were structured. And he made the suggestion in writing, we've given it to you, attached to one of our letters. Again, since Rod Palmer issued his decision, we didn't have it then, okay? We sent it in the last month or so, couple of months. And he said, we recommend that you put a more substantial, higher sand backstop in that pistol range, okay? And we recommend that you do that in 2000. Now you might say, well, why wasn't it done in 2000? I have submitted an affidavit since Mr. Palmer's decision from Mike Rabisa, who's here, who signed it as all 5 of our affidavits were signed under the pains and penalties of perjury, who signed it based on their own personal knowledge, and who signed it based on their own personal knowledge of this club and its ranges. And he says he's been a member since before 2000, actually since 1990, I think. And he's now the president. He's been on the board for the last 10 plus years. And every year, okay, for several years after 2000, the subject of making the improvements to the pistol range backstop and the rifle range backstop, as recommended by Dan Crafton of Mass DEP, because they want people to be able to sift the lead bullets out of the backstops, not just shoot into gravel, okay? There's also a safety reason there. You don't want to shoot at gravel. Mike Rabisa has stated under oath that first they did the rifle range backstop sometime after 2000. He's not familiar with that. He wasn't on that work party. But in 2010, they formed a work party, and they put that backstop into that range. And they also, at the time, added the side berm, okay, to separate the rifle shooters from the pistol shooters, and the rifle shooting for the pistol shooting. They did not want an errant shot to go to the right and go all the way down the rifle range. Under oath. These are affidavits under oath. These aren't affidavits I moved in 2014, and the shooting has been the same, okay, ever since. I've been a member since, or my dad's been a member since, or my uncle's been a member since, and they've shot pistols there since the late 60s. In the same place, in the same direction, in the same area. Chip Warlow will tell you, he's primarily going to talk about the rifle range, that the aerial photos going back to 1980s, 1971, I think, he will tell you there's no obvious evidence of a pistol range, and there isn't much of a rifle range in 68. But in 71 there is, in 74 there is, in 85 there is. He's got like 14 photos. And the area right at the beginning of these 2 ranges, whose firing lines, are relatively close. The rifle range is for a little further back. The area at the back of the ranges is about 50 some odd feet wide back to 1971, 74, okay? The area at the front of that long thing that's on those aerial photos that Attorney Ammett has submitted, that we submit, that's about 30 feet wide. Now, why was the area so wide at the back? Because they shot pistols to the left of the rifle range at a shorter backstop at 25, okay, yards or so. And that's what all 5 affidavits that we filed have said. Mike Rabisa, Mr. Walker, who's here, his father took him there, John, David, Augusta, Roger, John Roger John R. Augusta III's son. They all know this. They've all said this. They're not talking about hearsay. They're talking about stuff, okay? They can either testify in court or they can testify to what their parents said. They're local people. They're not here to lie to you, okay? So let's talk about what is going on with, by the way, there is vegetation in the end of that backstop. The vegetation at the very end is a berm that was added in 2010. Absolutely, it was added in 2010. And there isn't one single affidavit that is given by anybody with competent knowledge to say otherwise. In fact, they don't say when the backstop was added. They don't say what was added. They don't say when the berm was added to separate the two ranges. And they don't say what it was added for, because they don't know. They have no idea. What they tell you is the shooting has got much worse since I bought my house.
Attorney George, I hate to interrupt, but you have 2 minutes with your presentation.
I appreciate that, sir. The neighbors complain in Attorney Amit's letters of cardiovascular and hormonal disturbances in an unsigned questionnaire which he's filed early on in this case. And I'm just going to say to you that a very similar case about a very similar situation involving the Maynard Gun Club, the Maynard Rod and Gun Club, was described by Judge Sullivan, quote, as posed in soap opera terms. And those are the affidavits. Those are the conflicting affidavits. We're upset about the noise. We don't like the noise. Well, guess what? They're all second homeowners. Now, maybe you could show me a few. Can I have the next picture? There is the trap. Please, Susan, slow down. There's the trap range. If you can- There. The trap range is up in the air. The trap range has a line of sight to the houses along in Waterby Estates. The trap range has a line of sight, and the sound from the trap range is louder than the rifles and the pistols. And the acoustical engineer that we hired to do the test to determine what was louder from where says the trap range is what's louder, not the pistol range. Okay. The pistol range is down in the gully, just like the rifle range is down in the gully. I don't want to waste my time talking about Mr. Kramer, the guy whose article is attached to Bob Amit's letter. Mr. Kramer says basically he's a PhD. Well, my wife Janet is a PhD. She's not an acoustical engineer, okay? He's complaining in his article about the problems he has with his hearing because he used to shoot, I suppose, in the Army. He doesn't say that I recall, and he wasn't wearing earmuffs. Okay. Am I talking about both of these, rifle and pistol?
You did
I have one more comment. If you look at the affidavits and you look at the documentation that Bob Amit has supplied, and he can only supply what his clients tell him, just like me, every one of them that in any way attributes the increase in noise to the pistol range. I don't know why we're here about the rifle range. I suspect we're here about the rifle range to put pressure on us to shut down the pistol range, because there's no evidence whatsoever that says that, argued, presented, or otherwise in any affidavit from any of his clients, that the rifle range causes any increase in noise, that there's been any change in use in the rifle range. And that's it, sir. Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to have that. Oh, and there's one thing that I hate to overlook. I would like to give you a copy of the deeds that this club got from its land. It's public record. I think you should have it. Can you give that? Thank you, sir. Oh. Oh, sorry. We'll get them out of the file and we'll submit them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.
Well, we do have cyanide. Noticing some people in the back who are standing, there's about second row, there are some open seats if anyone wants to take a seat up front. Sari, should we hold off on board questions for now, or?
Yeah, let Attorney Amit.
Sure. Attorney Amit?
Thank you, Mr. Hurry, members of the board. I don't want to repeat what I said at the September 28th meeting. I did submit to the board last week. Thank you. I submitted to the board last week a copy of the presentation that I actually did make on September 28th, so I hope you've had an opportunity to review that. This is a case in which we have two appeals, as you know. Mr. George has just spoken with regard to both matters, and I will do the same, and that was the format at the last hearing. I know that members of the public who would like to speak probably not bifurcated their remarks on the different appeals, and I hope that the board will be somewhat indulgent listening to speakers from both sides in their presentations. Now, considerable correspondence, photos, and other documents, legal text, and case references have been submitted in support of the neighbor's appeal and in support of the building commissioner's cease and desist order. When the building commissioner issued his cease and desist order only with respect to the pistol range, he didn't have all the information that's available today. He didn't have some of the photographs that you now have, including the photographs that I'm going to show you. And he also didn't have the information that we now have about the 1985 notice that the Trap and Skeet Club recorded and had served, which clearly identified the club as for trap and deleted any references from prior notices done by the same attorney to a rifle range and a pistol range. And even Mr. George tonight has specifically said that it was a trap club, and the neighbors understand that and have never objected to the trap. But as Mr. George said, we think that the pistol shooting and the rifle shooting was incidental. It was not a frequent activity. It was an unscheduled activity in the sense that it wasn't like the trap, and you knew when it was going to happen on Sunday mornings. And an incidental use of property is not a prevailing use, and it doesn't have the benefit under the law of a pre-existing nonconformance. So whether the pistol range was improved, berms installed, whether the rifle range was lengthened or changed in 2014 or 2010 or in 2000 or at any date after 1970, it required a special permit. Essentially, that's what Mr. Palmer has told you tonight. A special permit was required to make these changes and to expand the rifle range and the pistol range. The club will tell you that only a few members shoot on these ranges, or that their hours are limited. But there have been times when their hours have not been limited to the extent they are today. And we believe that the limitations in place now are in part, if not in main, due to the pending appeals. And without a special permit, which is needed in any case, but without a special permit to regulate the hours and the type of weapons that are fired and other details of the operation, one, there's a violation of the law, and two, the neighbors are not protected in the sense that there's no assurance that the present conditions will remain. We have indeed submitted correspondence from long-timers at the club who have stated that the rifle range has been a problem. And rather than have Mr. George speak for my clients, I'd rather, in the discussion that will follow, let you hear from people who will talk about their experiences, and in particular about the change that happened in approximately June of 2014. Let me show you now, or point out, the two photos in front of you. One is the 1970 photo, and one is a 2014 photo. And on the 1970, on both photos, in the exact same place relative to the ground, a yellow line has been drawn 300 feet long. Now we know already from the photographs submitted by the club that the rifle range was extended from about 150 feet long to 280 feet, an increase of 80% over the years. That's a substantial expansion, and it had to have resulted in increased use in different types of weapons being used. But the specific importance of these side-by-side photos, let me see if I can make that. Like, yeah. There's that yellow line in each. And here's the
Microphone, please.
those are the conditions in 1970. And in 2014, this photo shows that to the left side of that yellow line, remember it's in the identical location, everything on this side of that line, which is a pistol area, does not show up on this side of that line here. And you've seen pictures, you have them in your file, they were shown previously, that show that this whole area is a raw, recent work that was done. And the dates of the photos coincide with the experience of the neighbors who, with that work being done, experienced a great increase in the shooting from the pistol range in the summer of 2014. Let me show you some more photos. Kevin, I might need your help on advancing this.
The clicker does it for you.
What's that?
The clicker advances for you. Well, it should.
Gonna go with that.
Which one are you looking for?
Thanks. I'm gonna tell you each of that. So this is a photo taken in 2011. It says 2011, 2012. Up here, right there. And this is the cleared area for the rifle or range area. And confused Kevin about how to. Sorry? Thanks. I just want to go forward on. Okay. So this is that photo. It's this one is this photo shows this clearing area. It doesn't show up on the earlier photos. So consistent with what Mr. Palmer has said, there was an expansion of the shooting area for the pistol range. So there was an expansion of the shooting area for the pistol range, and that required a special permit, as Mr. Palmer has said. All right, so those are those two photos. Still confused, Kevin. I'm not sure.
We'll just have to close out this one, Bob.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, perfect, okay. I'd like to comment on some of the information that's been submitted to the board in the last week. In other words, since the last hearing, you already have a lot of information that was submitted previously. There were 3 letters with respect to the same house submitted, a house at 158 Old Meeting House Road. This is a map of, that shows this Trap and Skeet Club right here. This area. This is the Water by Estate subdivision. All of the red marks are homes of the complainants. Down here is 158 Old Meeting House Road. And the correspondence, the letters say that that's less than 3/10 of a mile from the club, 4/10 of a mile by car. The town has mapping tools, including a tool for determining distance. So I'm going to give you this that shows you the actual distance. And that house by car is 0.48 miles from the club entrance. And as the crow flies, it's 0.46 miles from the beginning of the pistol range. So that's more than 50% farther than represented. What I want to point out is that the club has found one property for people who say they aren't bothered by the activity at the club, and that's the closest house where somebody says they're not bothered. And what you need to do is listen to the people who are bothered, each one of them who has rights to the enjoyment of their property. And if a special permit is required under zoning, they're entitled to require that the club get that special permit. So there's an opportunity to review all of the details and place conditions that can give permanent protection to the neighbors. And anything that's happened since 1970 would require that. Doesn't matter whether that work was done in 2010 or 2014, but the evidence is that it was done in 2014. Maybe by now I've got this right. In 2014, the club was in the process of getting permission to have a cell tower over here. And here's the rifle range. This is a plan submitted to the Board of Appeals, done by a professional land surveyor who notes the topography and the lines of vegetation, and he shows only this narrower area, and he labels it rifle range. And that plan is last dated, I believe that's March of 2014. There's no pistol range shown there. The pistol range was substantially cleared and changed in June of 2014, after which the neighbors started to hear a lot more noise, which they'll tell you about. Now, one other slide that I'll give you now that I'm an expert on this. I want to remind you about this notice, and there's the 1985 notice. And again, this document says it's a trap range, doesn't mention pistol, doesn't mention rifle. We know that this document was intentionally edited that way because the other notices previously recorded, prepared by the same attorney, specifically mentioned pistol and rifle. Attorney George has stated that those were incidental uses. They don't get the protection as pre-existing non-conforming uses under those circumstances.
Mr. Chairman, not what I said. I didn't say they were incidental use in zoning purposes. I said they were incidental.
You can clarify
to
it
the traffic.
later.
The board should uphold the building commissioner's cease and desist order, and the board should determine that the rifle range does not have the status of a pre-existing non-conforming use. Even if it was more than an incidental use, the substantial expansion that's occurred since 1970 could only be allowed by special permit. The club certainly shouldn't be allowed merely to relocate the pistol range back onto the rifle range, but the board should determine that a special permit is required because of the, as an extension of the trap club. Now, one letter also submitted last week said that the club was willing to install shoot houses around the shooting ranges, or that they had offered to, or there'd been discussion about it. Effective sound containing shoot houses may be a big part of the solution here. Mr. Hurry, Mr. George spoke for 1/2 hour, and I need another couple of minutes.
I've been keeping track right here, Attorney Allen.
If I may, I'll just take a couple more minutes. Is that all right?
Yes.
Ed, how do you feel? Sure,
Thank
just
you.
a couple of minutes, Attorney Allen.
Thank you. So my hope is that the Board of Appeals does determine that the rifle range and the pistol range requires a special permit, and that the club will design very effective shoot houses, that the club will agree to conditions responsive to neighbor concerns, that the club will apply for a special permit, and that then, subject to conditions, the conditions may be such that the neighbors can live in harmony with the club. You know, the voluntary limitations that the club has put in are not sufficient and need to be, have the benefit of a special permit. Thank you.
Can I just have 1 minute?
No, let's follow that. You can clarify later, TJ.
You can
Wait.
clarify later tonight.
Later.
I won't jump up there, I'll just say.
TJ.
Sure, Attorney George, you'll have an opportunity to address that later tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You wanna go?
Mr. Palmer?
Rod Palmer, Building Commissioner. So there's 2 appeals on my cease and desist, and I'd like to address specifically appeal number 68-17. And that appeal was based on my cease and desist in not including the rifle range. In all the documentation, in all the photographs, there clearly was a rifle range in 1970 based on photographs. And we've looked at other photographs from more recent time, and it would appear that maybe the rifle range has lengthened. I don't know. The photos that were taken in 1970 versus the photos that were taken more recently, I'm not a photographer. I don't know what elevation that airplane was at. I don't know if the later ones were taken by satellite. So for me to analyze those photos, having been taken with completely different technology, I don't know. I don't know the length of the rifle range, what it was in 1970, how many feet it was. I don't know if it was 200 feet or 300 feet. Clearly it was there before 1970 or during 1970 when that photograph was taken. So for me, after analyzing the photographs, in good conscience, I could not include that in my cease and desist. I could, in good conscience, determine that that pistol range has been enhanced or created. So for the purposes of the appeal number 68-17, that was my rationale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Each one of that for 5 minutes. So you want to start with Attorney George? He can rebut his comments.
Attorney George, would you like to?
Excuse me, and I'm sorry, there's so much in this case to describe it in 15 minutes or 20 minutes. And that's not the board's fault, it's the fault of the facts of the matter. When I say the rifle and pistol shooting is incidental, I'm comparing it to the trap shooting. Meaning, It's incidental and it is not organized at a specific time and a specific date like the trap shooting has always been. Has always been on Sunday. You'll see that in many affidavits we filed. By incidental, I mean whenever a member of the club wanted to go down and sight in a rifle, wanted to practice with a pistol, they would do it during the defined hours of 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., historically, for all intents and purposes. Years ago, it was longer than that, but that's what they do. They go in and they shoot. They don't sign up for a match. They don't sign up on a sign-up sheet. They just go in and shoot. As one of our witnesses will say, people do that all the time, and they've been doing that all the time in the same ranges, okay? That's what I meant, incidental, not being defined as Tuesday from 3 to 5 or Sunday morning, 9 to 3, that kind of thing. That's all. Thank you very much.
Rod's questions, comments.
Attorney Ahmet?
Do you have any comments on Rod Palmer's comments?
Why not, that it's the prevailing use that's protected by the case law. Thank you.
Okay, board questions. Who do you have questions for?
All right, we're going to turn it to board questions now. Ed, do you want to start us off? No? Bob, do you have any questions?
And for who?
Yeah, I guess just
And for who?
just for Attorney George, regarding that berm, was the material brought in to create the berm, or is it excavated from site?
I believe it, I honestly, it's not a question I've asked. I think we could direct that to Mike Rabisa, who's here, who was there for that. I don't believe it was brought in, but I don't want to say to you that I know. Mike is in the back. If I could direct that question to him, I think he could answer it.
You can do that. Excuse me,
Yeah,
excuse me.
You'll have to come up to the podium and state your name for the record.
But only to the question.
And only to the question that was asked by Bob, which was was it the fifth?
Yeah, just, was it Phil brought in or just?
Okay, my name is Michael Rabisa. I live at 29 Milton Street in T-Ticket. I lived here my entire life. The fill was on site. It's been piled up for years. On the at the back of that clearing is where you can see it all. Okay.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Revisa.
A question for probably all three, Commissioner and the two attorneys. We don't dispute if there was a separate rifle range, but if the rifle range and the pistol range were on the same place, that would establish that they were firing rifles. And then the question would be, if they moved the pistol to a separate range, how does that constitute a substantial expansion if the range was smaller than it is? I don't know how, other than adding a lot more ranges, one determines substantial expansion to the pistol range
Is that a question?
for everybody.
Well, let's let the commissioner.
Well, let the commissioner first,
He's
but,
the one who determines what the expansion is.
but I would also like to hear from the attorneys as in writing or
Basically,
later.
They have said that already.
Rod Palmer, Building Commissioner. I don't know what the conditions of the site were before that berm was created. I don't know what the topography was. I'm not sure what might have been there for vegetation. I don't know if it was heavily wooded where that pistol range is now. I'm not an acoustical engineer. I don't know if creating a berm or modifying the topography of the earth would cause the noise to increase for the neighbors. So I certainly can't opine on that. But the creation of that berm, the removal of the vegetation, could very well have increased the noise level for the neighbors. So for that reason, I would have sent the applicant, Midway Trap and Skeet, to the Zoning Board of Appeals to analyze that, to look at that proposed earth berm, to look at that proposed area where the pistol range was, and perhaps an acoustical engineer would have been brought in to opine on it as well.
Well, partially, because I think I was a little bit on the wrong track. So you're saying the substantial change is based on the impacts to the neighborhood, not a physical change to the berm itself?
What I meant to say was that the modification to that site,
Right, pistol.
pistol, certainly trees had to be removed. Maybe those trees that were there were impacting the sound transmission to the neighborhood. I don't know. Maybe the topography of the earth. I don't know. I don't know what the pre-existing conditions were. So had the applicant come to me to talk about the need for a special permit, or would there be any permits necessary, I would have said yes, a special permit would be necessary to modify that site to create that earth berm, or that area now that's known as the Pistol Range.
Because of the potential of adverse impacts to the neighbors.
That's right.
As opposed to physical earth movement.
The physical characteristics of that Pistol Range
Change that, I'm sorry, I
may,
shouldn't speak for
it
you.
may, yes.
But it's primarily because of the expansion of the use, which would be under your jurisdiction, correct?
That is correct.
Well, I guess I'm still confused. If there was a pistol range and a rifle range, and we don't have records as to how often episodically people were firing there, the only thing we default to is the photographic evidence of what can be seen and not be seen. A physical change in the land, or, which we'll eventually we'll hear from today, is adverse impacts from increased noise, which could have resulted from a change in the topography of the rifle range, I mean, of the pistol range.
That is correct.
Oh, I think I got that.
I think I got that.
Okay.
Did I speak to that, or
Yes, I think I asked all three of you if you,
that's the chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
We have submitted an acoustical expert's report, but we didn't ask him, because we didn't see it as an issue, whether the berm increased the noise to the neighborhood. Gunfire and the sound from gunfire, as I've learned from listening to the particular fellow, Eric Thalheimer, whose report you have, and other acoustic engineers, it's airwaves. First of all, there was one rifle range, and there was a expanded area to the left where people shot pistols at a shorter distance. What happened in 2010, according to Mr. Robessa's affidavit and other people who filed affidavits, is they cleaned up the backstop, installed sand in it. I think they did some other things like put some used tires in there to absorb the rounds. And they moved earth, which I now find out, they got on site, not off site, on site, between to separate the two areas. We don't agree there was an expansion. There was an installation of a berm. I think, and I will submit to you, any acoustical expert will tell you, if you fire a gun in a certain direction, the noise propagates out. If you put a berm to the side of it, it's going to cause it to propagate up, not over there. Any acoustical expert will tell you, I think, and I submit to you, that if you install earth berms around a range, it absorbs noise, it does not enhance noise. The same thing is true, for example, of a backstop. Part of the sound that comes from firing a gun is the bullet hitting the backstop. If you're shooting into a hard earth backstop, which the DEP said, don't do that, we recommend you put soft sand in there that you can sift, because they wanted them to sift the bullets out. They don't want the lead sitting there, okay? DEP abhors piles of lead sitting, especially in rifle and pistol backstops. That was the whole purpose of their lead shot initiative, because it's all there in one place. So they said, put sand in, you can sift the bullets out. a side effect of that is you're not shooting at a more solid surface. So, I mean, I'm not an acoustical expert, but
I don't think you answered my question. I can interrupt you.
Okay, sir.
Is that the, and I guess I'm going back more to the structural changes. You're saying that the berms were put in and that should have reduced the noise, in your opinion?
if it did anything, I
If it
believe
did anything.
yeah.
But by putting in the berms and disturbing X amount of soil or the range, is that a substantial expansion?
I don't believe it is. There's no structure there. The only structure you'll see in the pictures, I'm sorry, I don't have
It's an
them up there now.
alteration of the land and its
Yeah.
use.
Yeah, that's right. The only structure is the shooting table and they put on the pistol range, and that's movable. That's a piece of furniture. Thank you.
I'm anxious for you to hear from neighbors who can tell you how their experiences changed in 2014. The Powers versus Barnstable Building Commissioner case is the lead case in this issue. It discusses what are the tests for determining when there's a substantial change. Now, if the range use is not a protected use, it doesn't matter, it still would need a special permit. But let's assume it was a pre-existing non-conforming use and not a mere incidental use to the trap club. What kind of changes does a pre-existing non-conforming use have to undergo before it requires a special permit? And the Powers tells us that there are 3 tests. And one of those tests is that if there's a change that results in a change in the degree of the impact on neighbors, or if it results in a difference in quality or character on the neighbors, then you need a special permit. Now, in this case, maybe the pistol range simply became better to use, more desirable for people, because that seems to be what happened. There was a lot more use. There's a lot more use that was unregulated and should have been regulated by the zoning bylaw. Our position is that there was substantial physical change. We've shown you the photographs which seem to bear that out rather clearly. You have to ignore those photographs or say we really don't know what they mean or that we don't know how they were taken. It seems to me those photographs are pretty clear to show a substantial area to the left of the historic rifle range, which itself was expanded by 80%. But we can see that there was change, and it was accompanied by a different experience, an unregulated experience by the neighbors. And all we're asking for is that there be a special permit requirement so that that whole history can be reviewed by the Board of Appeals and the use of those ranges can be regulated. Thank you.
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman, about the photographs. I didn't think that's what we're talking about. Briefly.
Does any board members have any questions?
It's board questions right now. Jerry, you?
No, I think I've probably exhausted people's patience with my questions, but I have learned.
Just one. Any other questions?
Any other questions, Jerry, or are you?
No, I'm
Okay.
set for now.
Suri, do you have any questions?
No.
I believe that both attorneys, or both sides, they both agree that the Powers test controls. Attorney Ammon, I know that you said that. Attorney George?
I think the Powers test is the most recent fundamental statement. There's another case called Chuckwin which also is on point. There are a number of SJC decisions that are on point. I think that the Powers case states the three elements, but what you have to look at, okay, is what exactly is in those cases. What are the facts of those cases? In Powers, somebody owned a piece of land, they ran a candle selling business there. They bought another piece of land that was a residential parcel. In fact, the case describes them as parcel 1 and parcel 2. They moved their their candle business, the administrative part of the business, to parcel 2 that used to be owned by somebody else that was in a residential zone, okay? And they installed a candle making factory on parcel number 1. Right? The club, the Midway Trap and Ski Club, has absolutely no similar facts to the Powers case. Powers is a statement, all right, of 1, 2, 3, what's the effect on the neighborhood? Has there been an expansion that's detrimental to the neighborhood, et cetera? But the facts of Powers are completely irrelevant to this case.
Sure, I understand that the facts may be separate, or different from this case, but I guess first it was Chuckman, and then Powers came out with that three-pronged question. Do those questions themselves, do they apply to this case here?
As a theoretical postulate of the questions to be asked, I agree they do. But if you look at the Powers case, the court found a 5-fold increase in the business of that site. We're not looking at that. We're not looking at 5-fold anything.
Mr. Chair?
Attorney George, I apologize, but can you get up to the lectern? I do have a few follow-up questions for that.
Sure. And the other thing, as long as I'm walking, is I wanted to make the point that what you have from Bob Ammett, Attorney Ammett, is photographs from 1970 compared to 2014. In the portfolio of photographs that we gave you, there are 14 photographs over the years that Chip Warlow has put together, who's also, I don't know what the formal name of it is, but a guy whose job for years for the Agriculture Department was to study and take aerial photos to determine sizes of things. So when you compare 2014 back to 1970, all I ask is you look at what Chip Warlow put together in the package, which I know Suri distributed to everybody. That's the historical progression. And although you don't see a berm in those earlier photographs between the two areas, you see a much wider area at the beginning of the ranges, okay, much wider, and on the left, much shorter, and that was the pistol range. So the issue is the berm. Does the berm need a special permit? I don't think so. I don't think putting sand in there instead of gravel needs a special permit, but I don't know if that's, I'm sorry, I don't know if that's what you probably didn't want to ask me.
You got some of my questions, so that's all right. Just focusing on the Powers questions. So in 1970, there was skeet shooting.
Trap shooting.
I'm sorry, trap
Yeah,
shooting.
no, they're both play target sports, and it really just relates to, this club is called, by the way, for all the ado about it's not called Rifle and Pistol, it's called Midway Trap and Skeet. There never has been, and nobody has ever shot skeet there. Skeet is shot from 8 positions around a semicircle, right? It was invented by a guy up in North Andover as practice for grouse hunting, by the way. And it's shot at targets that fly from right to left and left to right in exactly the same direction each time. So you're moving around looking at targets flying the same way, but from different positions. Trap shooting, you have 5 positions rather close together, and a machine that throws clay targets out of one central place, and it throws them in, basically, you could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elemental angles, but basically away from you. And here's the catch. You never know which way the target's going to go. It could go left, it can go right, it can go middle, it can go quarter left, quarter right. But there's never been a skeet range.
Okay, thank you.
And the guy who drafted the document, the lawyer who's now passed away, we don't know. We don't know. Everything about what he thought and did is complete supposition, and it's derived by comparing those things to the Falmouth Rod and Gun Club, which is a much larger facility. All right? And if you study it carefully, I think you just don't come up to the same conclusion.
Thank you. And so if we just imagine that the year is 1970, was there a rifle range and a separate pistol range, or?
I think that photo was taken before in fact, I know it was 6 months or whatever before the change in the bylaw. I think Mr. Warlow's first photo after 1970 is 1971, and it does show the rifle range and it shows the expanded area, okay? In the beginning of the range area, side by side, much shorter pistol range, longer rifle range. Those photos, all those photos, especially including the ones that you read Attorney Emmett's letter, his expert wasn't there. He didn't walk the place. He didn't ground-proof it. Okay? He's taking, as Chip will explain to you, a dot on a map, on an aerial photo, a dot, and expanding it 300 to 400 times. Okay? That's his 1970 photo. To come up with conclusions about what is and isn't there. And as long as I'm on that, the land surveyor working for the tower wasn't there to measure. You know, it's contradictory. In 2014, he doesn't show a pistol range. Well, the opponents to the club say that in 2014, okay, they suffered from an expanded pistol range. I mean, I just have to object to a guy who's doing a plan for a cell tower. Okay, I would consider myself an idiot if I assumed, knowing what I know as a lawyer, that he went out and measured what was there for the rifle range or the pistol range.
Thank you, Attorney George.
Okay. Thank you.
I was actually going to ask you a question, so. Focusing on the powers test, Attorney Ament, I believe the third question of the powers, third prong, is whether the current use is different in kind and its effect on the neighborhood. Guess what would be the definition of neighborhood when it comes to that third prong of the powers test?
Well, it unquestionably would include the neighbors who live in the abutting area. Thank you. It unquestionably would include the neighborhood that's abutting. Now, there is a recreation lot between the trap club and the houses, but this is obviously very close. So the neighborhood, people are affected in the Waterboro Estates neighborhood. We've shown you the, now that I know how to do this, I just don't want to do it. Certainly this is all the neighborhood that is affected by the activity at the trap club. And we really have two different issues that Powers addresses. And a couple issues. One, do we even have a protected, prevailing use that predated 1971? If we don't have a prevailing, if these ranges were not a prevailing use, if they were just incidental, if they are not protected. But assuming for discussion that they were prevailing uses, then the question is what changes can be made, and there are three different tests. And if the change trips any one of those tests, it's not all three, any one of the three, if it's tripped, then a special permit is required. So it's actually, our position is that the rifle range and the pistol range were incidental. They are not the same as trap. It's a different nature of shooting. It's a different schedule of shooting. And I know one could argue, well, we could have trap 6 days a week, 6 hours. That's not the way it works. It's a trap A trap is a club sport, and the shooting is with a group of people. It's a sport, and it's different in its nature than the rifle range or the pistol range, and I think that Mr. George has indicated that that's the case, the way it's used. So we don't think that those uses reflected the nature or purpose of the pre-existing non-conforming use, that is the trap club. There is a difference in quality and character as well as degree of the resulting use in its impact on the neighborhood. And those are the tests of powers. Now, I want to comment on Mr. George's reference to some photographs. We have the photographs done by Mr. Warlow, and I know he's here and probably will want to talk about them. And you have them as well. And if you compare the photographs taken dated May 20 of 2010, which perhaps was before the work was done that year as stated by the club, and then look at the photograph of March 11, 2012. I'll show you these in a minute. And then look at the one dated 6/15/2014. I simply don't think you can. Okay. You look at that 2014 photograph, middle of June, and you could see that there was fresh work done. It's not there on the 2012 photograph, and it's not there on the 2010 photograph.
Thank you, Attorney Allen.
And I'd also wanted to just say that the photograph that Mr. George last referred to in 1971, that's in August of 1971, a photograph. The zoning change was changed on March 1, 1971, and the effective date of that change is from the publication date, which would have been at probably at the end of December for a planning board hearing on that change. And that's why we really identified pre-1971, after 1970. Those are the important dates.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
I recommend that you hear now from Chip Werlow and then take a break before public comment. Sure.
Mr. Warlow?
Here's your gavel.
If you could please state your name and address for the record, and you can continue with your presentation.
Yes, I will. My name is Charles Warlow. I'm from 8 Alderbury Circle, East Falmouth. Oh, is that not working? Okay. I'll stand over this way a little bit. And I guess we want to talk about my stuff here. Starting off with my credentials, I do have over 35 years' experience working with aerial photography in the USDA. And interpretation for individuals, farmers, and other government officials. The thing that I have that Mr. Admin and his people don't have is I have access to the club because I am a member.
Microphone closer to you, Mr. Werlow, please. You can pick it up and take it out of there.
All right,
Thank you.
I'm wandering, I'm sorry. Okay, is this all right now? No, pick it up. Okay, here we go. As I was saying, the thing that I have that the Mr. Iman's people don't have is I have access to the club because I am a member. And as such, I was able to ground truth every distance that I found. And that's going out there, walking it with a steel tape and measuring everything. Okay? And then the variability, because of my experience with photography and USDA, I'm very aware of the variability of photos. It's unbelievable the kind of stuff you can when you have an airplane up there, you don't know if it's at the right altitude. It could be blown sideways by the wind. Depending on the time of day the flight is, you can have long shadows. Depending on the time of year, you can have heavy tree cover or no tree cover. There's just all kinds of things that can mess up your figures. So when hold the microphone close to my mouth. Okay, sorry. I did. That went in there. I think somebody else left theirs in here. And it's still up there. How's this thing? Up. Go. All right. Okay, thank you. All right, and must be another page down here. Yeah. Okay. The 91 photograph. This photograph is from 1991, and I show it because this photo was actually enlarged and normalized by the USDA, and it is used, as you can see here, there's acreages on it, field sizes, all this kind of stuff. This is used by USDA to make payments to farmers. Okay. All right. To make payments to farmers. And, all right. And actually right down here is part of our range. So I was able to use this. Here we go. Here's the range right here. Okay. I was able to use this to ensure that all of my photographs were close to scale. And I made my best estimate at the length of the ranges based on what I could see. Of course, with tree cover, shadows, all that kind of stuff. Because I can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So anyway, that's the way I did it. This is the range here. It came in, I believe, at 265 feet. But the other thing I'm picking up right here, which you can see, that is the backstop. And then so that's, I feel pretty good that that number is good. And when I went out and I measured it, I came out with a range length of 265 feet on the ground today. So in each case, all of these photos up through 1995, I gave my best educated idea of how long each range was, each year of range was. And you'll find that they start, or they 200 or so, and they pretty much stay there. And then, improve a little bit every year. And the other thing I did notice on the 1971 photograph, if I can find it here quickly, where's the jump again? Yep. I want to get back to there you go, okay. All right, so if we go to, the 1970 photograph, which actually is Mr. Ahmed's. Oh, that's his original photograph. And this is a nice big photograph here, but if you see this little spot right here, that is the area that he enlarged. And let's go back again. And I'll close the tabs, and then we go to this one. And that little yellow circle, that is both of the ranges. And that was blown up enough that we could see it. And quite frankly, it was on the edge of visibility. It was starting to get over enlarged. So I don't know if the numbers on it are quite right or not. And we go back again. And then we go and we look at, let's go back to my
Mr. Worrell, just a
71
moment.
here.
For those in the back, you can't be blocking the exit. If you could move to the side, please. Thank you.
Here is my 1971 photograph. Okay, showing the range here. And actually, I measured the width in this case too. And it came out at 55 feet wide. And when I compared that with ground truth today, at that part of the range, today it's 57 feet wide, and that includes the pistol range. So that's,
Could you repeat what you just said?
sure can. The 1971 photograph, and actually Mr. Ahmed's 1970 photograph, also shows this range at the shoot from the shooting end at 50 to 55 feet in 1970 and 71.
Should be saying wide or long, which way?
Wide. The two ranges side by each total 50 plus or minus 55 feet wide. Today, it's essentially the same. It's not
Without
any
the-
wider now than it was then.
So that black line going up is both the rifle and the pistol range?
That,
Going up at,
oh, yeah, my black line pretty much goes down the center line of the rifle range.
oh,
And
okay.
you'll see the white area to the left is that wider area that is the pistol range. I don't, because of the, this is my photo, I'm getting on the edge of magnification here too.
I was just trying to understand what you were saying.
Okay. Anything else?
Are you all, are you done with your presentation, or
Unless there are questions, I can be done, yeah.
we could turn it to questions? Ed, do you have any questions?
No, it's time.
Bob?
No.
Jerry, any
No.
questions? Marie? No questions for me right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think we'll take a 10-minute break. Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll be entering the public comment phase of the evening tonight. And there are a few new faces in the crowd, and it has been a long night, so I just want to go over our policies for public comment. I ask that everyone please silence their cell phones and any electronic devices. Please be courteous to one another. Do not make any derogatory terms or statements. As the chair, I'll recognize an individual to please come up to the lectern, give their name, address for the record. We will be adhering to a strict 2 minutes on your comments or questions. You address your comment or question through the board, and then we will ask the appropriate representative to answer the question for you. I'll just repeat again that we'll be taking public comment in this order. We'll go with opposition to the appeal for Midway Trap first, followed by support of the appeal for Midway. Then we'll go to the opposition to appeal for Bagley et al., followed by the support of appeal for Bagley. Okay. So we will start with the opposition to the appeal for Midway. Would anyone in the public like to start us off?
Picture, so you could show where you live.
Oh, thank you. My name is Erin McCormick at 71 Southview Way. Thank you for hearing us today. We have owned a home at 71 Southview Way since October of 1996. Our house is directly across the street from one of the abutters to the Midway Trap and Skeet Club. Over the past 20 years, the noise from the Midway Trap and Skeet Club has turned from background noise to a major disturbance in our lives, particularly on weekends. Our house on Southview Way is a vacation home bought originally by 3 related families, pooling their money together, toddlers to grandparents. We enjoyed access to the pond, playground, and tennis. At that time, Midway Trap was in operation, and we would hear occasional shooting, mainly on Sundays, but it didn't interfere in any way with our activities or lifestyle. The only issue I can think of in those years, those early years, was the occasional party they would have in the summertime outside. The music was really loud, but we never complained, never thought to complain. It's the Cape, they were having a good time, we were happy. Since the summer of 2014, the situation has changed markedly. The volume, rapidity, duration, and type of shooting is much greater and often startling and disturbing to hear. When I say rapidity, I'm talking about how often, how quickly you hear the shooting. With the trap and skeet, it's slow, leisurely. The sounds that we've heard since summer of 2014, it's more like the noise you would hear in a TV show or a movie. When there is shooting going on, we close up the windows, particularly at the front of the house. We sometimes put on fans or the air conditioning to mask the noise. On Sundays, we no longer have coffee and read the paper on the deck, nor do we have midday barbecues outside because of the difficulty of holding conversation. We avoid the tennis courts or playground area while shooting is going on, not merely because of the noise, also because of the concern about stray bullets. We may leave the house and neighborhood altogether for the specific purpose of getting away from the noise. My husband worked every summer of his youth at a family food store.
Thank you, I'm sorry. We're holding everyone to 2 minutes.
That's the 2 minutes?
Yes, but since you did make a prepared statement, you can hand it to the clerk to be submitted for the
Okay.
record.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Next for opposition for the appeal for Midway.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, opposition or support? Which
This is opposition. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Yes. My name is Shelley DeWicki. I live at 329 Old Meeting House Road. I'm a butter as well, because all of us who live on Old Meeting House Road, directly across from the Trap and Ski Club, are also abutters. I bought land, my husband and I bought land on Old Meeting House Road in 1983. The Trap and Ski Club was there, and I was certainly concerned about the noise and what was going on there. I did make a visit at that time because we were planning to build a house at some point. I asked them what they did. I was told when I went down to the Trap and Ski Club that it was a trap club and that they shot on Sunday mornings, and that was pretty much it. They would have occasional parties here and there and use the club, but it was relatively quiet. We ended up building a house there in 1985 and have lived there since. As a neighbor, all of us are there every single day, so we hear what goes on 7 days a week. And since I've lived there, it's 32 years now, I can say that the level of noise has certainly gone up, and as our previous speaker said, the rapidity. It's much more common. It is not just on Sunday mornings. It's very often during the week, and it has increased. Now, whether that's trap or some other type of shooting, I cannot say because I don't do those, but it certainly is much more often, much louder. I too, sitting on my back porch, it's very loud. My land is directly across from the cell tower that was put in on land leased from the Trap and Ski Club. So I have that to deal with, and I do hear the noise, and I'm not trying to have the Trap Club move because they were obviously there first, but I would, as a citizen, hope that they would obey any laws and zoning laws in the town of Falmouth, just as I, as a citizen, have to do. And hope we can find a solution. I know the neighbors at Waterbury are much more affected than I, but I do hear it, and I think many of my other neighbors on Old Meeting House Road hear it as well. And I hope we can find a reasonable solution. Thank you.
Anyone else in the public wish to speak in opposition?
I'm Steve Huban, 62 Southview Way, but actually I'm reading an affidavit from Bob Dutra, who could not be here, so he asked that I read this for him.
Was the affidavit previously submitted into the record?
Yes, I believe, yes it was.
Then do you have...
Do you have anything to add to what he was going to say?
Or anything stating that you can speak on his behalf?
Well, I was just going to basically read this, and that it sort of reinforces the point based on his discussion with a member of the club.
If the affidavit's been submitted to the record, you can assume that we've read it, which we have.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I'm sure. I don't have to hold it. Hi, my name is Diane Huban, and I reside at 62 Southview Way. And our property line is roughly about 400 feet from the Midway Trap and Ski Club. We bought our property in 2001, and I would like to say that it is not our second home. It is our only home. Over the years, we have found the Midway Trap and Ski Club to be good neighbors. Noise was limited to a couple of days a week, mostly Sunday. It was off in the distance. It was very innocuous. And from time to time, as was mentioned, there were parties with loud noise, but always at the stroke of 10, they stopped. But then in 2014, it all changed. Suddenly, the noise was deafening. It could be heard any day of the week and way closer to our house. In fact, so close that I'm in my backyard, I often have the urge to duck. The difference was night and day. I'll be honest, I hate guns. If I had my way, all the guns on the face of this earth would be destroyed. But my own husband owns guns, and I totally understand and respect that our Constitution allows citizens to bear arms and that the members of the Trap and Ski Club have a right to shoot. However, one of the things that attracted me to our property was the potential for a garden, for an opportunity to bring nature into our own backyard. and I have labored on that for the past 15 years. I have gardens, I have more bird baths, more bird feeders, bird houses, etc., etc. And I've even seen foxes and wolves and deer in my yard. My goal was to create a peaceful respite for my family and my friends. But now that sense of peace and tranquility has been shattered by the sounds of guns and with a sense of unease. While I respect their right to shoot, I am asking that you protect my right to enjoy the peace and quiet of our own backyard. In this day and age, with all the reports of gun violence, when I hear those loud, piercing gunshots within a few feet of my own backyard, my own house, I can't help but wonder, what if there's an accidental discharge? What if something goes awry? I have no assurance what, if any, safety measures are in place. Are these shooters licensed? Is there any oversight? Are they being supervised? It's also my understanding that they have a license to serve alcohol from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. Those hours coincide with the hours members are allowed to shoot weapons. Alcohol and guns don't mix. We don't want to close them down. We want to coexist.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition?
Can you hear me? Do you want me to take? Can you hear me now? I'm Susan Connors. My husband Andy Zimmerman and I own the house at 49 Southview Way, part of Waterby Estates. I'm here to read a letter submitted by Ann Buckley. Ann has she already submitted this? No.
No, but you can submit it to a record unless you have proof that she
I have
gave
an
you the
email
right to speak.
asking me to present this.
If you could present that to the file when you get done.
I don't
Would
have
that
it
be
with me
okay?
right now. Do you want me to? What do you want me to do?
Submit the letter.
Do you have the letter with you?
I have the letter.
You can submit that.
Okay, so
Right. Yeah, you can just submit it.
Okay.
And since this is the second time it's happened tonight, I just want to remind everyone in the public that if you need to have prior written authorization from a person to speak on their behalf here tonight. If you could, you can send it to the ZBA office.
My name is Karen Hargraves, and I live at 31 Southview Way. I will read my statement to efficiently cover the impact the pistol range has had on our family. My husband and I owned a home in Waterby Estates since 2007, and we have been full-time residents since 2009. When we bought our retirement home, we realized that the neighborhood was located next to a trap range. Shooting was infrequent, and the noise was more muted than we hear today. After the club added a pistol range in 2014, placing it closer to our neighborhood homes than the trap range, shooting has been more frequent, and the noise from pistols is very loud, with rapid fire and pinging from metal targets. This gunfire is very disturbing on an emotional level, and in addition, it disrupts our life. At times, it feels like we live in a war zone, with rapid fire by several loud pistols and pinging of metal targets. We avoid the playground and tennis court during shooting, which is primarily on weekends, prime time for guests and midday during the week. Our grandchildren are apprehensive about going to the playground, and they have asked me, is it safe? And even, will I be shot? Our dog is also frightened by the noise from the pistols, although shotguns from the trap shooting does not seem to bother her. When we sit on our deck at the back of our home, with a house between the pistol range and our deck, our conversation is interrupted by gunfire. Guests always wonder how we can stand the noise. I am angry and frustrated that my right to peaceful enjoyment of our home and neighborhood recreation has been taken away by the pistol range, with no attention or concern to the impact on our lives in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Sure.
Hello, I'm George Bagley. I reside at 46 Southview Way. I'm a complainant in the enforcement request and an appellant in this matter. Thank you for allowing me this time. Our property abuts the Midway Trap and Skeet Club, and our rear deck is 500 feet from the new dedicated pistol range. We moved into our house at the end of June 2014, which proved to be a very unfortunate timing. We did extensive due diligence before purchasing, particularly because of the proximity of the Trap and Skeet Club. We were certainly aware of the Trap Club. The large sign at the entrance said Midway Trap and Skeet Club in large black letters. It does not say Midway Sportsman's Club or Midway Rod and Gun Club or Midway Shooting Ranges. It says Trap and Skeet. In our due diligence, we spoke to neighbors, Water by Estate Associate board members, neighbors, people walking on the streets, and twice we visited the property on Sundays to hear the trap shooting. I shot trap and skeet as a youth, so I fully understand the difference between trap and skeet as an organized sport and rifle and pistol shooting. So how could longtime residents in the surrounding neighborhoods not know that the rifle range existed? It turned out we were not the only ones. It became clearer when I received a call from the president of the 300 Committee in September of this year. He called to confirm that he had heard from a high-ranking town official that a group of neighborhood owners had succeeded in having a cease and desist order for the pistol range granted by the town's building commissioner. Neither he nor his board, and apparently many of the Falmouth town departments, did not know that the rifle and pistol ranges even existed on the Trap and Skeet property, even while entering into a purchase and sale agreement for the Tony Andrews farm. Now, these are intelligent, well-connected people who usually do know or make it their business to know. All right.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Can I-
Bagley. You
can I submit that,
You can
please?
submit that to the clerk.
All right, I'm going to try to do some speed reading here. George did not get it. I'm sorry. I am Beth Bagley, 46 Southview Way. George did not get a chance to speak about the fact that he owns a business and has a home office and how the shooting causes him stress. So that's a summation. I'm going to follow forward with that. He did not get a chance to speak about that, but he is, in fact, more susceptible to stress than probably anyone in this room. He doesn't like to draw attention to his nervous disorder, which is called essential tremor, but I will because it's very relevant to this proceeding. You might remember Katharine Hepburn, who later in life had advanced symptoms where her head shook and her voice quavered. George's case is progressive and debilitating like that, and he now has varying degrees of tremors in his hands, legs, and body core. Stress increases the tremors significantly, and the tremors in turn create more anxiety. He moderates these tremors by taking 2 prescribed neurological sedatives during the day, which are monitored by his primary care physician and in consultation with the director of neurology at Mass General. The shooting from the club's rifle and pistol ranges is loud and erratic. The unpredictable nature of it is particularly stressful for George, and I have seen personally how it further aggravates his medical condition. My questions to the ZBA are, isn't George's right to a healthy quality of life what zoning regulations are intended to protect? And will we be forced to move out of our neighborhood so that George can have a life without anxiety? I'm going to talk while there's time, stop me when I have to, about the stress and shooting as they relate to me personally, because I am not a retiree in a second home in our neighborhood. I have a full-time job in fundraising for a local nonprofit. We are full-time, year-round homeowners on Southview Way. On weekdays, I'm away from my home for 10 to 12 hours each day. That leaves me 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, when I can actually enjoy my home during daytime hours. However, the weekends coincide with the most intensive shooting periods at the Trap Club, which prevents me from the quiet enjoyment of my home for most of the free daytime hours I have. Okay. Surely this is not the quality of life that the town of Falmouth supports for its residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can submit that to the clerk. Anyone else would like to speak in opposition to the Midway's appeal? Okay. We can move on to anyone out there who wishes to speak in support of Midway's appeal. Mr. Putnam?
Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brent Putnam. I live at 97 John Parker Road, and for the record, it's hidden. I live about as far as the crow flies from the range as the Tobias Way dot does. I was a member of the Conservation Commission from 2004 to 2007, a selectman here in Falmouth from 2008 to 2014. I am not now, nor have I ever been, a member of Midway, nor do I have any applications pending. I am a neighbor. As a neighbor, I can testify that the noise is not excessive, not unusual, and on most days, nothing is heard. As a selectman, I heard no complaints, and I heard a lot of complaints when I was a selectman, but absolutely no complaints about Midway. What I've given you is a map, and the question, of course, comes about, does this pre-exist? Were these here prior to 1971? And as was said earlier tonight, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. In the two photos, you'll notice the first one has nothing on it, but the second one shows Adamancet Road superimposed on it. And that's because underneath all those trees on the first photograph that I've given you is actually a road that's been there for decades and is well used, but can be well hidden, and is well hidden by the trees. So to answer Mr. Potamis's question about, could it be that there's shooting there next to the rifle range that couldn't have been seen? Yeah, it could have been under the trees. Because you can, in fact, and hunters do all the time, shoot next to and beneath trees. Just because the land was not completely cleared does not mean that there was not a formal range there. Another piece of evidence that was used to establish that there is no or was no range there prior to 1971 were the club's newsletters stating that the rifle range was mentioned only once or twice, but the trap range was mentioned over and over again. And that could easily be explained by common sense in that it doesn't take a lot to establish a rifle range, whereas a trap range requires a lot of work to clear and to set up the range itself. So there would be more time required or more updates required to the membership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Putnam. Anyone else would like to speak in support of the Midway's appeal?
Nathan Swing, 149 Percival Road, grew up in Falmouth. I'd just like to point out a couple of things that Mr. Almond said. With this map here, he said that everybody with the dot is opposing and there was only one person. I know that they went to everybody's house in the area. So those other dots, they are with the gun club, I would imagine. And then can we go to the plot plan that Mr. Matt has shown? Is there a way you do that? Yeah, perfect.
This one? That one? That's the cell tower one?
Shows the cell tower.
The one that he showed with the rifle range on it?
Cell tower plot plan.
This, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's...
Okay, maybe if he
right
zooms in there. Yeah, so there are bathhouses that, yeah, there you go. Next to the rifle range, there's some outdoor bathrooms that have been there since 1960 that, this was done by a professional and it does not show those on here. So it also doesn't show the pistol range. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in support of Midway's appeal?
Good evening. My name is Eric Dublera. I live at 8 Elizabeth Island Road, Pompanesett Beach, Mashpee, Massachusetts. I'm on the board of directors of the Midway Trap and Skeet, and one of the things I do is I reconnoiter the logbook when people come in to shoot. For an example, in the month of January, we could shoot 186 hours. Of 186 hours, we shot 21.25. In February, 168 hours, we shot 19.2 hours. March, 186 hours, 10.30 hours. We do not shoot a lot. This is a working man's club. The guys here have defended this country time and time again, and I think it's a travesty to try to close this club and close the ranges. Thank you very much. Well, sure. They have it already. It was
Oh, is it? Okay, thank you. Yes, it's in there.
We do have your affidavit, yes, regarding the hours. You could probably hold on to those if there's an affidavit in there, then that covers that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Mrs. Putnam?
Good evening, gentlemen. Rebecca Putnam, 97 John Parker Road. As you heard from my husband, we live close by. We moved into that particular portion of the neighborhood in 2001, and I can say that during the summertime, we hear very little activity there. We do get up on a Sunday morning. You hear some rounds fired. It is not machine gun firing, as some of these folks have stated. I am here actually as a real estate broker to speak against the letter that was actually submitted by another real estate broker and about property values. I'll submit to you right after, but I have several repeat sales of several homes from 1996 up to 2014. There have not been many sales in that neighborhood, as it is a neighborhood that I'm guessing people love to live in. And if folks did not do their due diligence, or their brokers did not do their due diligence in letting them know that there is an active range or possibility of gunfire, they should be actually having a conversation with that realtor's insurance companies. If it is that bothersome to you and you had no idea, it's called buyer beware. You have realtors to represent you, to protect you in those instances. So the other item too is I would like to say is that my great uncle was a member of that club. I attended many functions there from 1976 up until about the early 2000s. And they've been nothing but a respectful group of folks. I do own guns, and they're one of the few that I think actually accept women as a member. And that is very hard to find. So I do applaud these folks. They do care about the neighborhood, but unfortunately, you have a lot of storms, you have a lot of trees fall down. Guess what blocks sound? Trees. You might want to request that trees be replanted. That might help your sound. And when you're firing in a direction away from the homes on Southview Way, the sound does not travel towards it, it travels towards Tony Andrews Farm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Putnam. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike D'Souza. I live at 39 Crocker Road. I have lived there for 56 years. I currently hold the office of Vice President at the Midway Trap and Skeet Club. I am the range officer there, and I have been on that committee for 25 years. I was also the president in 1985 when we signed the letter of intent, myself and Tom Lapiori, of the neighborhood. And the concept behind it was some awareness is better than none. It wasn't a depleting of the rifle and pistol out of there, as you heard. By the hours are shot. Members don't shoot there a lot with rifles and pistols other than sighting in their rifles. to go hunting mostly. I'm primarily a trap shooter. I shoot all 4 seasons. I'm there every Sunday. We've had a few of the neighborhood come over and have talked at different times. Tried to get a rapport going with certain ones. We did with some we didn't, some moved out. You know, we're just a local bunch of guys, blue collar, and unfortunately, we get to work. We get to shoot on Saturdays and Sundays. That's our time, as unfortunately as everybody else's. You know, we regulate our time, 9 to 3 in the afternoon, and we hold our guys to it. And if we get anybody with it, as I had told some people that I met over there in previous years in 2012, if you hear shooting after that, call the cops. We want, because we're kicking you out. We don't put up with it. We're not going to put up with it. We did have to install a gate, and that has stopped a lot of we did have some side traffic going in there, shooting during the day, and we were unaware of. Now the cameras are up. We video everything going in. Logbook, Eric, as you heard, keeps the logbook. You're mandatory to sign in. If you're caught, you're gone. It's no nonsense, because we can't shoot down the cranberry bogs and everywhere else anymore. So more people are coming to our club, joining the club. We're almost at full membership now, and yes, we did just get 2 women in the other night. But, you know, we got a waiting list. So we do have, I did research some of the minutes, unfortunately, and I like to put them, 1960, that they did the ranges, layout of the buildings and stuff. I just found them.
Mr. Chairman, could he state the hours of the gun club, please?
Sure. If you could go back to the podium, please.
Can I borrow this? I just ran out.
Shooting is 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The way it's worded is Sunday through Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. My name is Michael Rabisa. I live at 29 Milton Street in T-Ticket. I am the acting president of Midway Trap and Ski Club. I've been a member since 1991. I've been either a board member, officer, board of directors in some capacity since about 2007, and this is my second term as president. I just wanted to point out a couple facts that a couple of the other guys have pointed out. Mike D'Souza just did as well. Our range is 9 to 3 only. We do not shoot any time before 9. We do not shoot any time after 3 under any circumstances. You will be immediately expelled from the club. It's also been brought up a number of times in the past that there is active hunting on the Tony Andrews farm and as well at Pond 14 down in the hollow off of John Parker Road. During hunting seasons, there's constantly guys out there hunting, shooting. We always seem to catch the backlash. That's not always the case. We are very well policed. We have a very vigilant group of range officers, Eric DeBlyra, Mike D'Souza, a number of the other guys. We have cameras on our property. We have a gate on our property. Quickly before I run out of time, there are no cannons fired at our range ever. There has never been a round of skeet fired at our range ever. Skeet shoots opposing angles, trap shoots away. Every single round fired at that club that has ever been fired has been away from the houses. Look at the range, look at the houses. The rounds travel downrange towards Tony Andrews Farm into a bank. It's been that way since day one. It continues to be that way. Nothing has changed in relevance to where the ranges are, where anybody shoots, or anything in that regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Gavin. I live at 158 Old Meeting House Road. I am not a member of the Skeet Club, and I do not own a firearm, but I'm here in support of them. I've been in this location for 9 years and have not heard any difference in the firing on Sundays or Saturdays, or even during the week for that matter. There was a letter submitted to you by Judy Siebert that Mr. Ahmed had brought up about the distance. The distance that this woman, Judy Siebert, had taken was in her 2012 Toyota Camry with a digital odometer, which is quite accurate, and I can vouch for her accuracy and honesty since she is my mother. I do have questions about some of the photographs Mr. Ahmed has submitted. One looks like it may have been taken off of Google Maps. If it has been, take a look at it yourself sometime. You'll notice that it's usually taken in the fall when there's no foliage. That makes a world of difference when you evaluate these photographs. You really do need to know what month they were taken. That'll give you more accurate information on your judgment on if there was any increase in size or not, but apparently there wasn't. I took a walk down there myself. Doesn't look like anything's been done there for years. What they call a berm is just a pile of sand. That's all it is. And I don't see any reason why they should be hindered whatsoever. Many of these people are members of this community. Some have lived here for most of their lives, if not all of their lives. And there's a number of them that have served this country for us as well, too. And they are veterans of the wars that have protected us and our rights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Mike McCarthy, and I am not a member, actually, of Midway, but I am living at 18 Dealinda Place with Vicky Vitello. I've been living in Waterby Estates since 2011, February of 2011, and I have seen no increase as far as the firearm shooting, the noise difference. Myself, I am active duty Air Force. I'm pretty familiar with firearms and the noise. And I would also say that since I've lived there, I've actually also seen 12 new families move in and 12 families move out. So we have had quite a turnover in the neighborhood, which might account for some of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in support of Midway's appeal?
My name's Eric Peterson. I live on 32 Bonnie Lane. I'm a direct abutter to Rod and Gun Club. I generate plans like this all the time, and I can tell it's just superimposed, traced from GIS. That area, over in the area where the tower is, we probably would have done a survey, get it all right, but we wouldn't have spent any time on this end of it. That's how I would do that. And when I was a kid, we used to come down here for turkey shoots. And I remember shooting about from here, and they'd set the targets up close up for us because we were just kids. And that building was always there. And later on in life, we would shoot rifles. And I remember pacing out, to get the 100 yards, and we'd just get into the parking lot a little bit to get the 100-yard shots off. But, and then also, walking down this range way back, there was, on the right was always vegetated. Maybe because of the contour of the land, it wasn't so steep. But on the left was always like one of my uncle's gravel pits. It was always, earth coming down. It was never, I don't think it was ever vegetated when I was down there. And I'm talking like 1970. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak in support of Midway's appeal? Okay. Now we'll turn it to opposition to the Bagley appeal. Anyone like to speak opposed to the Bagley appeal? Sure. So the Bagley appeal, this is the appeal of the building commissioner's determination of the zoning violation and the cease and desist order that should be extended to the rifle range. I'm sorry? Speak again?
Matter, yes, 2
Right.
minutes. 2 minutes on this matter.
In essence, if you're speaking against this, you want to shut down the range, right?
You're speaking against this, you want to shut it down?
I don't know, I'm asking for clarification because I'm confused.
That's, so are we.
In opposition to this,
Go ahead.
It wouldn't be a shutdown. You're in
Be support.
opposition to the appeal. If you want to support this and shut it down.
Okay.
So, this is
You
in
didn't.
opposition
I think Bob was confused too.
to Bob's appeal of Bagley.
Okay, once again, Michael Rabisa, 29 Milton Street. I'm the active president of the club. In regards to the appeal for shutting down the rifle range, the rifle range has been in the exact same spot. Mike D'Souza may be able to reiterate a little bit more on this than I am. As long as I can ever remember, again, from the 1990s when I joined the club, it's always been the same spot. It's always been shooting in the same direction. There has been no expansion. There's been nothing added to the club other than some cardboard to the back of the backstop. You know, as for targets in that regard, we do occasionally every year or two have a big cleanup. And when we do, we cut down all the dead trees, we cut down all the slash, and we just try and generally clean the property for safety in that regard. As far as it being in the same spot, being the same length, all of that is the same. Chip showed that in his pictures pretty accurately. And we'll all stand by the fact that the rifle range has been in the same spot forever and holds no bearing on any of this. Thank you very much.
And my apologies to the public with the size of this case, and especially with two appeals opened at once. We thought it would be best to divvy up the public comment just for the sake of record keeping and keeping everything straight.
Yeah, Mike D'Souza, Vice President of the club. I got voted in the club in 1976. I had shot down there prior to that in 1970 in the rifle range, where it is now. Hasn't changed, same location, other than the bunker that was added due to DPE's regulations and things like that. I shot there with my father prior to that, and then when I was old enough to become a member in '76, I got voted in and I've been there ever since. I still shoot the rifles when I get ready to go deer hunting in Maine or wherever. It's been the same, you know, same direction, same location. I don't know what else to tell you other than we've shot there since as far back as I can remember with my father, and he was a member, and that's all I can tell you. It's, you know, it's a father-son club. We got one guy in the audience tonight, he's fourth generation. You know, that's all I can tell you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, we have submitted affidavits from 5 people, I know I said that before, but they all refer to the length of time that the rifle range has been there.
Yes.
And they all talk about it being there in the late 60s, so.
Everything's been submitted to both records.
Yeah. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak in opposition?
I don't know if Bob Walker's here, Bob Walker.
Good evening. My name is Bob Walker. I live at 14 Happy Hollow Road in East Falmouth. I've lived there for 30 years. I'm 57 years old, and I've been a member at Midway since 1976 also, a little over 40 years. We were a junior membership. There was 4 of us that got voted in from our elders. Members wanted to start the youth program, so we got voted in at that point, and shooting there started with my father, for me, in around 1970, 72, somewhere around there, going to the turkey shoots, helping out on the ranges, working on the trap range with him because he was a range officer at that time also. Pretty much that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Yep.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition to the Bagley appeal? All right, we will move on to if anyone would like to speak in support of the Bagley appeal.
My name is Donald Condaction. I'm at 71 Southview Way.
I am basically across the street from an abutter of the ski club named Bob Dutra. Now, I know we've heard a lot of discussion tonight about there's noise, there's not noise. I can tell you I'm living it, I'm across the street from it, I hear it all the time. And I've been there 20 years. So it's not like I just moved in the neighborhood, but I've been there 20 years. And so you hear the rapid fire, the loud rifle shots. You know, I mean, people, I don't know where they are, but if they're not hearing it, I don't know how they can't be hearing it. It's clear, it's distinct, it's there. The activity on the rifle range has expanded. I mean, you can talk about what's been happening all these prior years, that's great. But the story is right now they're doing different types of shooting there. And that's a different use. And that's kind of what the issue is here tonight. It's not about how many years there's things have been going on there. We know it, the land's been there forever. What's the big deal? But the story is that the activity there has changed. I live it, I know it, I guarantee it. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? About the last statement.
After we do support first.
Right, we can address that after the public comment. Would anyone else like to speak in support of the appeal, Bagley's appeal?
Peter Hargraves, Southview Way. There's been a lot said by both sides, and I think somewhere in there is everything you need to know. I'm concerned especially about the representation of some of the photographs, though, since I was personally involved in acquiring the 1970 photograph. We searched throughout New England with companies that specialize in aerial photography, and the pixel density of that photograph was sufficient so it could be blown up even more than what you saw there, that clearly showed the rifle range and the pistol range and the expansion and intensification of use that Mr. Ahmed spoke to. So I know that you guys are not taken in by that photograph from 10,000 feet with a little yellow dot, because it's all about the pixel density, and some of the other photographs that were presented by others were even more pixelated and, I would say, blurry than the one that we acquired, certified from a bona fide aerial photography service. And so I would say that based on what's been presented, I think that the cease and desist order is insufficient. It patronizes our request for peace in the neighborhood, and I think it's inadequate because it doesn't halt the harmful and illegal noise. We're not asked, this isn't class warfare between white collar and blue collar, or the Washashores and the people who grew up here. It's not what it's about. It's about the fair application of the bylaws of the town of Falmouth. And we never said we wanted to shut down the gun club. We just want sufficient and adequate conditions to restore our neighborhood to what it was before 2014. And by way of background, let me just finish to give you a footnote. This all started when in 2012 the Barnstable Gun Club was closed for some issues which they had lead contamination. And there were many people there who couldn't shoot before the Country Club was established in Hyannis. And there was a recruiting effort, and those competitive shooters were brought in, and that's where the intensification of the shooting was first noticed, and it's since continued. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hargraves.
Is there someone call my name?
He said thank you.
Oh, I said thank you.
Oh.
Beth Bagley, 46 Southview Way, once again. I'd just like to state that closing the pistol range has done absolutely nothing to change any of the circumstances, because it banned only the use of the range, not the use of the pistols. Pistols continue to be shot regularly just a few yards away on the rifle range. As long as the rifle range is in operation, pistols, rifles, and who knows what can continue to be shot 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 42 hours of potential jarring rapid-fire gun noise in our backyards. But closing the pistol range has had no effect, and that is why we're asking for the rifle range as well, because there is no way to prevent pistols from being shot on the rifle range. Thank you.
Thank you. Attorney Ahmet? 30 minutes. We'll give you 5 minutes.
Well, I'm speaking actually directly to the issue of the rifle range, which is before you at this time. I just want you to look at, again, the photographs, not the photographs that we submitted, but the photographs that Mr. Warlow submitted. And look at the August 5, 1971 photograph, where it says on the photograph, and you can see that the length of the rifle range area at that time was 160 feet. The statements that the rifle range hasn't changed since before forever are simply not true. It was 160 feet long, according to Mr. Warlow, in that photo 8571. So if it's now 265, that's an 80% increase, a substantial increase. Take again a look at the 2014 photograph that's in the package Mr. Warlow presented to you. You cannot look at that and not agree that the pistol range area is all newly disturbed area in that photograph compared to both the 2010 and the 2012 and the 1970 photographs that you see. And you've heard from the residents of the nearby neighborhood about how the recent years have witnessed a change in the type of shooting and the amount of shooting. To have people who live 4/10 of a mile away or somewhere else say that they aren't bothered and tell the people who live 500 feet away from the range that they don't have a problem, they're not able to do that. It's not their call. The zoning is to protect every single person. It's to protect somebody like Mr. Bagley. Some people are affected more, some people aren't affected. It's the same thing as was with the wind turbines in town. The fact that some people in town are affected more and some people are less doesn't mean that the zoning bylaws aren't there to protect everybody, each individual. And we have shown, I believe, that there's been substantial expansion of the club since 1970. A special permit is required, as Mr. Palmer said. And in fact, we believe that there were changes in 2014 and that they've had a material impact on abutters. All we're asking for is that the club get a special permit. Now, the club tries to emphasize how few hours they shoot, how few people shoot, that the rifle is mainly for sighting before hunting season, that they have better security, that they keep a log and are enforcing their hours. Well, none of that was happening a year ago. All of that's because of this appeal. And we need assurances, because of a special permit, that those kind of regulations will stay in effect. And the town should want the club to work on sound mitigation. We know that they can reduce the sound significantly with shoot houses. They should be properly designed, properly engineered. They need building permits. And they should be installed as a condition of the expansion that's occurred over the years.
1 minute.
Thank you. I don't need it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I do, I'll take just a second. I do, one more second, because I prepared it. I do have that photo with the 1970, the 2004 photo, side by side. And what I've done is copied that photo on a plastic sheet, reversed the sides, and laid it over the same photos. So you can see that the line drawn on that is in the exact place on each of those photos. And you can see, looking at the 2014 plan, that the pistol range is visible there, freshly created. It's not visible on the 1970 plan.
Thank you.
Summation from 5
Attorney
minutes.
George, can give you 5 minutes to.
Summation.
No offense to Mrs. Bagley or Mr. Bagley. No offense to Mr. or Mrs. Bagley. I have an essential tremor too, diagnosed at Mass General Hospital by a Mass General doctor. And I take medication for that. And I shoot skeet every time one of my sons or my son-in-law would go, probably at least 10 times a year. Which is to say, there is no medical evidence, much less proof, that Mr. Bagley's essential tremor is caused by shooting. That comes from doctors. It doesn't come from hearsay. With regard to the reality of is there a change in use, look at the definition of a gun. An item that fires a projectile under pressure from expansion of gas, just, towards a target or in the direction of a target. Trap guns are guns. The trap field is up higher than the rifle and the pistol range. Pistols are guns. Rifles are guns. They're all guns. They're all in the same place. I'm not going to go through Mr. Warlow's maps. I'm sure that would bore you because you've already looked at them. But yes, the length of the rifle range, as you can see it in those photographs, which Attorney Emmett says are questionable. He says his are questionable. The length changes over decades, as you can see it. But the rifle range is still there in the same place it originally was in 1971, on the 1971 photograph. There's no evidence from the opposition as to what noises they are hearing. Somebody got up and said, it's the same noise. He doesn't know if it's a rifle or a pistol or a shotgun. He has no idea. He wasn't there when the shooting occurred. He doesn't observe. Nobody who has testified or filed an affidavit for the complainants has observed which guns were being fired. Yet they say, well, it's all the pistol range, because in 2014 the pistol range was built. But now I think we know now the pistol range wasn't built, okay, in 2014. It was built in 2010. It wasn't built. It was simply had a backstop that was improved, and a berm was put between it and the rifle range. Now they say, well, that noise is coming from the rifle range. It's not from the pistol range. This is nonsense. This is non-evidence. This is non-testimony. This is, if wishes were horses, my mother said, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride, okay? They don't like noise from a gun club, and they moved in next door to a gun club. The gun club is protected from noise complaints under Chapter 214, Section 7B. We've argued that in some of our materials. I ask you, read the statute. Mass General Laws 214, 7B. It says, if an organized club has a range or ranges in existence prior to the enactment of a bylaw They're grandfathered, and they can shoot, by the way, from like 8 in the morning to 8 at night. Midway Club doesn't do that. They shoot from 9 to 3, all right? The Chapter 214, Section 7B doesn't say if a rifle range exists prior to the bylaw, if a pistol range exists, okay? It says an organized ranges, and it includes all of them, okay?
Attorney George, you have 1 minute.
Yep. The powers analysis allows a permissible increased degree if it is a continuation of a pre-existing use. The power increase in manufacturing operations, including volume, traffic, etc., are all considerations. Additional products, hours of operation, in some of these cases, did not change the character. This is just a gun range. It's always been there. And if you look at one of the photos, which I had trouble fiddling with that directional thing, okay, one of them, you can see the sign from the club is like, it's like from me to the last white wall over there, from the entrance to the Waterby Estates. Thank you.
Do we have a question? Do we close the hearing tonight or continue it in case we have other questions we may want to ask? I may think of something over the weekend when I think about this and go back and
The board
read.
should discuss if the board feels like they had enough information, if they want to close tonight, if they want to continue the hearing, but it is a board discussion.
Okay, that's what I
So
was
we
getting at.
do have options.
Yep.
We could close the hearing, which means no further testimony is given.
Yep. And we can't ask for the questions from either attorney.
Correct. So everything that's on the record tonight is on the record. We'll have to get all our information from there if we do close the hearing.
Do you want to give the other options so that the board and the public can understand?
Sure.
Close and advisement.
So I just explained closing the hearing, that no other further testimony is taken, and we can make our decision if we have all the information that we think is necessary to render a decision on these two cases. We could also take the matter under advisement, where we could close the hearing and then review all the information and basically continue to have a discussion at a later date.
A board discussion.
A board discussion, which no further public testimony or anything like that is taken, where we discuss everything and then come up with a determination. And what am I missing, Saray? Are there any other?
Or close and make a determination.
Close and make a determination tonight, so.
So you've got three options before you. The board wants to discuss if you feel like there's more information that you need, then you continue it. If you feel like you've got enough information, I suggest you close it, take it under advisement, review any of the information, and prepare yourself for a decision. But the board should discuss that.
I guess, without having a discussion, I don't know if we're going to have additional questions from the two attorneys. There's a lot of information. It's conflicting at best, judgmental. I don't know. I guess you weigh one side or the other. But I could go, if the rest of the board members feel that they have sufficient information, I could go along with that, but I just don't know. There's a lot of information.
Well, you can review the file. If you have any questions, you can review the file and see if it's in there, or ask me to research the file for you. If you want to close it and take it under advisement.
Well, the question is, if I review the file, I have a question, but it has to go to the attorneys, because it hasn't been submitted. I can't do it if we close the hearing. Correct? Or no one else can do it. Yes?
It's open to rebuttal at that point. So you either make a determination now that you feel like you're going to have more questions and continue the hearing and review the file in the interim, where you close the hearing, review the file, take it under advisement, review it, and at an open meeting, the board can discuss it and possibly make a determination. So, and it's a board decision, so I think all of you need to discuss this.
I mean, I think we've got so much information that's been submitted already. I can't imagine that we'd have too many questions versus what we already have to review. I wouldn't be comfortable with making a decision now, so I would tend to say close the hearing, take it under advisement, and then do a public discussion at a later date to come up with. Yeah, I would tend to go that we close the hearing, but take it under advisement, and then discuss it at a later date. I feel there's been enough information submitted at this point to review. That at least in my case, I don't think I would need more information for more questions, but I would need to review, what's been submitted so far.
I feel the same way. We'll have to go back through.
Does the board feel like they have enough information and they just want to review the file so that they can properly discuss it at a...
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah.
I can agree with the other members of the board.
So if that's your consensus, then you want to close the hearing, take it under advisement. You can discuss it in an open meeting, preferably December 15th, right? Because I'll remind you, both attorneys signed a waiver. Decision should be filed with the town clerk prior to January 15th. So it's up to the board.
So, yeah, we'll need a motion to close the hearing.
Excuse me, December 14th, I apologize.
December.
So I'd make a motion to close the hearing, to take it under advisement, and a public discussion at a later date, which would be December 14th.
You second it.
Okay, motion is made by Bob, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Will all board members be available for December 14th?
Let's hope so.
It will be closed to public, but I'm sure the attorneys will want to.
Sir, would that be here?
No, because we're closed to public comment, so it will be, and all these other hearings are scheduled already for Board of Selectmen. So it will be held at the Board of Selectmen's meeting room.
Can I ask a question? Procedural question.
Through the chair.
It's a discussion in public, but closed to comment. Does that mean it's closed for argument for lawyers as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Is it also closed for clarification? If amongst us, we can't agree on something?
You haven't had that discussion yet, so I can't answer that question.
Well, I know, but the question is, did
Yes, it is.
So they could not clarify anything?
If you have questions for them, you can, at the open meeting, ask a brief question, but there will be no rebuttal.
Okay,
That's
that's
the
what I
thing.
meant.
That's the issue with you guys closing.
Okay.
They don't get the opportunity to rebut each other's comments.
Right.
So you need to make it clear that you are ready to close this hearing.
Which we did, we closed it.
Right, well, you can change your decision right now.
No.
But you've got to be prepared
With it being closed.
to close that hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I have no objection to coming back and answering questions on 14. The only thing I would ask is if there's some severe storm, I'm willing to extend my waiver to another date to get the.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking December 14th,
Right.
we've been really lucky so far.
Winter is coming, so.
I mean, the other thing is, either one, if any of us can't make it. then
No,
there
no,
won't
no,
be a
you have to make it. You just
If I
made a.
die, will you?
You just made a commitment.
You know, there's a lot of things that could happen. Well, no, practicality is.
I was thinking.
Jerry, that we can't raise all those issues. You make a
We'll figure it out, I
commitment.
like that answer.
You make a commitment. The only thing that would change December 14th right now, because you stated it publicly, is an act of God through a storm or something like that.
Act of God, I can live with that.
So we did vote to close the hearing. We're taking it under advisement. We'll see everyone December 14th in the selectmen's room. So these two.
Remember, close to public.
Thank you.
So these two applications or appeals are closed out for the night. We do have open meeting items. So thank you everyone for coming.
You want to continue with the open meeting?
All right.
Have two sets of minutes to approve.
Okay, open meeting, first agenda are minutes, October 19th, 2017, and November 2nd, 2017. We still have a meeting going on, everyone. If you could quietly make your way out of the room, thank you very much. Minutes from October 19th and November 2nd. Has everyone had a chance to review them? All right, and I believe everyone was here.
Was everybody here on the October?
Yep.
Okay.
Would anyone like to make the motion to approve October 19th minutes?
You still being televised, so please.
Make a motion to approve the October 19th minutes.
Yeah, that's a motion by Ed. Would anyone want to second that? Second. Second by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye. Make a motion to approve the minutes from November 2nd.
Motion was made to approve the minutes for November 2nd. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Fantastic. Third piece on the open meeting agenda, board review and discuss procedural rules and policies.
I would like the board to think about putting that on an agenda soon, because we've talked about different procedural issues that really need to be updated in order to help this board, and that I can answer more stuff. So if we could please even do a separate meeting for the board to discuss that, I would appreciate it. So if you would think about it.
Any suggestion on dates at all? Or?
Any suggestion on agenda items?
Agenda items, I propose you put that off except for the procedural rules, because if you look at your schedule, you are fully booked.
Well, I meant agenda items for the, I didn't mean.
Oh, for the
For the discussion.
Yeah, that's another time, yeah.
That's, okay.
You guys need to think of a date and contact Kimberly and Ken, and let's get together a date
We
and
talked
do
about
it.
having a meeting, a workshop,
We can do a workshop,
that'd be a good time to do that.
yes. And also, December 13th, Julian Suso, town manager, sent an email asking for people to attend. We have a state representative coming to discuss in this room from 6 to 7:30, conflict, yes. And the department heads are mandated to come, and he also asked me to extend it to the board. And I think the board should try to attend this meeting, and please let me know if you can. Let me know in an email, because I'm not going to remember.
This is the one that was postponed from the.
Correct,
couple months ago.
because they knew that they were probably going to get a state representative, and I think it's important that the members attend. So please contact me by email, let me know of your attendance, December 13th, 6 to 7:30, in this room.
Thank you, Suri. Correspondences, board updates?
The only update to the board is the email that I sent you, that I received from Town Planner Curry regarding the status of the bylaw review. And I did forward that to all of you.
And future agenda items?
None.
None? All right. That's
As
it. Good
posted.
night.
Adjourn.